Good afternoon from a rainy January in Oregon. Yeah, I know, surprise. So I figured I'd take a break from working on the outside of the barn here at NerdSteading and focus on some of the interior issues in the barn. And by issues, I mean, shut up, horse, I'm working here, things that the electrical inspector from the county didn't really like when he came out to look at the new wiring. Yes, the wiring was in the shop area, not in the barn area. But it turns out that when a electrical inspector who used to be firefighter shows up in your barn, he might give you a courtesy safety report that points out some of the issues. Okay, first things first. The thing that he didn't like about the initial wiring from the professional electrical contractor is that they used the wrong wiring inside the barn. The shop and the barn are two different areas. And I've talked about how you treat barns differently. They're almost an outdoor environment, even though, fortunately today, I'm dry inside of mine. However, the normal kind of wiring used in a house is either Nomex or Romex, Romex being the latest stuff, which is designed to be embraced by the warm, loving arms of insulation and wallboard covering. That's not what happens in a barn. Barn, you run feeds typically along the rafters. For that, there's something called UF cable, which is what they should have used when they first did the installation and ran a new run from the barn's breaker panel to the shop. Did they do that? No. Did the electrician fix it once the error was pointed out? Yes, absolutely. And I credit them for doing that very quickly and bringing it up to code. Now, the trick is with the safety inspection. It's a courtesy, and I technically don't have to fix these things. But some of these are on the list, and I was going to fix them anyway, and others, despite the lack of appreciation from my two friends back here, these idiots, they're not going to care that I'm doing these fixes. But I'm doing it because I care about them. Because some of the things that are pointed out, they're unlikely to happen, but they are potential fire hazards. And I probably should do something about them. Now, first is the lighting situation. Most of the lights in the barn are now sealed LEDs. Some of the lighting fixtures that were here, or ones I brought with me from Georgia, were your standard ballasts for fluorescent bulbs. Cheap and easy lighting. It turns out you should use a sealed ballast in a barn or outdoor area, even if you replace the bulbs with LEDs. Now, I'm going to go on record here. I do not like the LED replacement bulbs that are available for fluorescent ballasts. They have the similar problems to bad fluorescent bulbs in that sometimes they don't light up, and from a cost standpoint, they are more expensive than replacing the fixture. So if you're in a situation where you can't go in and change a fixture, they might work for you, but they may not be compatible with your ballast. See, the trick with a ballast for fluorescent lighting is that fluorescent lights don't take 120 volts. They require a higher charge of electricity, higher voltage, lower current, to create the spark necessary to ignite the gas that is inside of the bulb. So it's kind of like a bargain basement neon light. Because there's a higher voltage from the ballast at the point of contact, the two little pins that are on the light fixture, that means that there is an exposed area where a high voltage spark is happening. And in the event that there's enough hay or dust or whatever, there's a possibility that that could cause a spark, which could cause a fire. And since I don't like these fixtures anyway, I was planning on replacing them with properly sealed LED fixtures. Now that the barn roof is fixed, I don't have to go completely outdoor, like military grade kind of stuff. I can get a cheaper sealed light. So I don't have to use the diamond plate stuff I bought at Lowe's. I can go online and get a 6-pack of like chainable sealed LED lights and mount them to the existing chains. There were some LEDs that I hadn't gotten around to putting in yet, and there were some ballasts that I was using as is with the fluorescent bulbs, and those are being stripped out. I did have a 4-bay fluorescent fixture that was up in our temporary shop, the 2-horse stall that we've been using to store tools. That cord turns out is damaged because it was on an extension cord in the rafters and would swing a little bit or sway depending on if I had pulled on the extension cord. It got wedged into the rafters, and I just decided to cut the cable on that, and I'm going to dispose of that ballast and not use it in the shop. Any place where I don't have hay storage, like the shop itself or the tack room, I could get away with using the fluorescent ballast and just pop the LED bulbs in, and I might do that for at least one of the fixtures and move it over to the shop. But in most cases, I'm going to get away from using those fixtures, it's a sunk cost fallacy, basically. I could continue using that fluorescent fixture because I had paid for it, or I could just bite the bullet and pay the same amount for a replacement fixture as I would for the bulbs that would go in it. So there's that. He had flagged us for the fans that we put up on the ceiling. It turns out that he shouldn't have. A lot of times you go into a barn, you see your standard like $15, $20 box fan from your local big box store, and they'll be awkwardly mounted in front of a stall or on a ceiling or in a ridge vent. Those things are terrible. They are cheap, but if you use it in a barn environment, you will burn through it in about a year because this motor is not sealed against dust. Now, the reason that I don't have to worry about this is because I spent an unreasonable amount of money on 2 fans when we were in Georgia, and they were originally mounted in the stalls where the ponies lived because it gets hot in Georgia and ventilation is nice. Those fans, legit, $150 a piece, totally worth it because they're sealed against dust, so they're not only not a fire risk in use, but also they won't die and I won't have to constantly replace them. Now, they are now mounted in the rafters of this barn, and so I don't want to have to get up on the damn tall ladder to change them. So yeah, I would rather stay down here on terra firma and do this once rather than every 6 to 12 months go up and change a cheap-ass fan that I bought at a Big Lots. There's some residential grade wiring in here. It shouldn't have been done that way, but it's pre-existing and I technically don't have to fix it. I can, however, make it as safe as possible. So there are several boxes that are not covered, meaning that they have a standard wall plate on them. That doesn't provide any protection for dust getting into the outlets themselves. So I got 2 things from the Magic south of the border retailer delivered to my house. One is a set of cover plates. They're your standard gray, available at any home improvement store. You've probably seen these on the outside of a house. They've got little doors on them that cover over the electrical plug when it's not in use. I've got one of them in the tack room, actually. And then in the cases of the lamps that I'm buying, the LEDs that I'm buying are chainable, meaning that they have a 120-volt plug at the other end to run the extension cord out of and chain the lights along. I don't like doing that too much. You can only run 3 or 4 of those before you start putting an inordinate load on the cable. You increase the amount of current into the initial cord because it has to pass that current down to the remaining lamps. So look at the instructions about how many of those lamps you can chain together if you buy that style. So it says 4 maximum. I'm going to do 2 to 3 depending on where they're positioned. And then on the areas when I'm not chaining the cord together, I'm going to take one of those baby safe plugs and stick it on the end. Again, trying to keep dust from gathering in that port. So I've got one new outlet that's technically not exterior, but it's close enough. It's at the entrance of the run-in area where we store our tractor and lawnmower, and it's designed to run the electric fence. Since there's going to be a cord plugged into that whenever the electric fence is active, I'm going to put a weatherproof clear housing over the top of that. It's on back order, but I'll get it pretty soon. And that way, if I have a cord plugged in, I can still seal the entire cord and outlet assembly from the elements. Yes, it's not outside, but it's on that inside to outside transition, and water might blow in. So I'm going to spend some time getting cobwebs on my hair and getting lights changed out and removing old electrical cords. Oh, that's the other thing. There's a lot of extension cords in this barn, and some of them we put up, some of them we didn't. So I'm going to go along and make sure that those junctions are safe on the ones we're using, and on the ones that we're not using, I'm going to pull them down. Really, it's just the beginning of the year cleanup. The stuff's unsightly, and it's just clutter I don't need. The other thing that potentially got flagged, and I was going to change anyway, to be honest, I've got this Wi-Fi router in the barn. And yeah, I know you don't really need a Wi-Fi router in a barn, but in areas where you've got bad cell signal and you want to run things like security cameras, it is kind of nice to have Wi-Fi in this area. It's also what powers the music system that I put on, if you want to go back and look at the Chromecast video that I did earlier. So the Wi-Fi router that's mounted on the barn office door above me is going to be replaced with a new TP-Link router, and that one is power over Ethernet. When I get into talking about security cameras, I'm going to talk about PoE, or power over Ethernet, a lot. That basically means that you don't have to have a power supply at the end point where you have an internet-connected device. So all the security cameras in the barn are power over Ethernet. So I can have a centralized power supply that is on a UPS. And the UPS, by the way, is going to go in the weatherproof box so that I don't have to worry about all the plug issues going into that gizmo as well. Yeah, it's a lot of odds and ends cleanup. And on paper, I know the safety report looks a little serious, but to be honest, the government isn't trying to shut my barn down. I know it's a little disappointing to have a document that's in a government file somewhere that says, hey, your barn's kind of shady. And when read out of context, it looks that way. But these are all minor code things. And honestly, it's minor, tiny stuff that's easy to do. I don't have to call a professional to fix it. I can just spend a couple hours out here not getting wet because the barn don't leak. Oh, happy day. We have electrical. Yeah, I know. I've got lights up in here, but they're being run by an extension cord that goes through the part of the barn where, we store tractors and things. That's suboptimal. Now, pending inspection, I have two 20-amp services and a 15-amp service for the lights. And, yeah, I've got power. So, high voltage stuff was done by the electrician. I have GFI outlets, 3 on one wall, 3 on the other, and a handy outlet on the rafter that I'm going to order an extension cord reel and hang so that we have movable power. And for lighting, instead of the extension cord, I'm going to use outlets that have been placed in the rafters, and I will hang LED shop lights and be able to move them around depending on my fancy and preferences. I have to finish the low voltage work, so that's putting in the speaker cable so I can put speakers in the far corners of the barn. And the internet, yeah, I know, I've already stuck a laptop on a table right over there and did a speed test to make sure I didn't damage the wiring putting up the walls. And I'm now going to wire in a couple of physical internet jacks. It turns out I thought I was going to have to put a Wi-Fi router in here. The internet speed in here is pretty good, and the Wi-Fi that I installed in the barn as part of my ever-expanding Power over Ethernet project gives me good signal in here. So I might not put in a secondary router. I might just leave that router out there for Susan and I to access, and then if we start boarding animals and such, I'll put in a separate guest router that's NATed so it's off of the home resources, which is originally what I had set up, but it turns out that router, what's the scientific term? It sucks. I should probably donate it to somebody who needs Wi-Fi in a very small apartment. But anyway, I'm going to spend my Tuesday lunch break taking care of low voltage wiring and putting up some lights and making this place just a slight bit more useful. It's still going to be, dirty. I have so much sawdust to clean out, but I don't want to do that until I'm done with putting in the trim. We'll talk about trim at another time. But for now, let's do some low voltage wiring. So I've got a network tester for the Cat 6 cable, but the question is, how do I check the continuity on the speaker wire that I'm running, even though I don't have a dedicated tester? Well, these are monoprice jacks, and they, just simply, you can put a banana jack in here or put a traditional speaker cable behind this little grommet. So what I'm doing is I've got these 2 old banana jacks from some dead meter probes. I'm just gonna basically intentionally, don't do this on AC by the way, intentionally short circuit this, and then I can go back to the test point at the main jack where I'm going to put the receiver and amplifier and make sure that I actually have clean contact on this. And I've already run the cable, and if there's anything really bad, I'm kind of screwed, but at this point I can just make sure that I have basic continuity through the jacks that I've installed. Thanks to my devastatingly simple hack, I can just take my free with coupon meter here from Harbor Freight, which I use for continuity testing. So I just put it on a 200K resistance. Yeah, I can just connect the meter across here on a resistance load, and that should read 0. And when I take the jack out, it reads 1. So that's how I'm verifying that I didn't screw up the speaker connections. Alright, time to get back to work. Usual YouTube disclaimer, like, subscribe, etc. You want to find out something new about the barn, ask a question, figure out why I did what I did, or why I am not doing what you think I ought to be doing. There's comments for that, but remember, be nice. My mom watches this thing. Take care and join us next time for NerdSteading.